Hi, I'm Nancy. My goal is to help you develop skills you need to become a watercolor painter. This is the first of 5 videos included in a series entitled Paint Your Garden in Watercolor Series 1. Series 1 features demonstrations on how to accomplish paintings of blooms from 4 butterfly-attracting plants: zinnia, moss verbena, African daisy, and azalea. These plants were selected to highlight learning certain essential watercolor skills. The sketches for these paintings, the materials list, the in-color reference photos, and detailed written instructions are included in a companion booklet of the same title. Information on how to obtain the booklet will be given at the end of the video. This video 1 will get you started. It will demonstrate the method I use to get an accurate copy of your sketch onto the watercolor paper. We have the first painting that is going to be featured in the series. This is a painting of a zinnia, and the sketch that you're going to be using is provided in a companion book that is going to provide full written instructions along with a video on how to get these paintings accomplished. So I'm going to set this aside. All the paintings that we will feature in this series are going to be done on a watercolor block. And the block has multiple sheets of paper, but they're all glued on the sides, and it really helps. You don't have to worry. It's very convenient. You don't have to worry about taping your individual sheets of paper onto boards, or you don't have to worry about the stretching of the watercolor paper. That is explained in the book. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take several steps. We're going to transfer this sketch onto the watercolor paper, and once you get that done, then you will be ready to start painting. So I'm going to first get the sketch onto a piece of tracing paper. Now, I like to use heavyweight tracing paper. This is a 50-pound weight. In case you want to redo it or do multiple copies, and I do that often, so I don't have to worry about many times that I trace over this that the pencil is going to come through on a thinner piece of tracing paper. So I like to use a heavyweight tracing paper. I cut it to a 9x12 width and length, and because this is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge because I have this combing here, but that's not a big deal. I'm going to position the tracing paper and I'm going to tape it onto the book. Now, if you're worried about tearing the pages of your book, this is artist tape. It is pretty sticky, it's pretty strong. Here's a tip: you can just place it on your clothes or on the fabric. That'll help you when you pull it off. It'll still stick real well, but it'll help the page from ripping. Now, if you're taping that on a good watercolor paper, I wouldn't worry too much about it because it's pretty tough. Just be careful when you remove the tape. All right, we're ready, and we're going to use a regular pencil, let's say a 2H or an HB, and you don't have to press down very hard. You just need to make the tracing to where you will be able to see it when you pull it up. I'm going to start with this, but to save time, I'm going to pull one out that we've already done, that I've already traced. But you get the idea here, and I'll show you just by putting a piece of white paper under it that I'm not pressing real hard, just enough to where I can see it, and it's a relatively soft lead. So I'm only going to do a little bit of that because I've already done it, and I'll just proceed just to save time. Now you can see I've removed that pretty easily. Okay, I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to bring in a tracing that I've already done. I'm going to just show you how I would attach this to the block. I usually do it in two places, and I'll tell you why. And I like to do it on the top, but a side is perfectly acceptable. We'll do it on the side this time. The reason is I like to be able to lift it so I can see if the transfer is taking place, and I can see it well enough. Now the other thing that we're going to be using is a piece of transfer paper that I have made. I like to use my own. The reason is I just get the best results. Here's a piece of commercial graphite transfer paper. I just don't like the results I get as well with these as I get with making my own. So I'm going to show you next how to make a piece of this transfer paper. But I'm going to just show you how the tracing is going to occur. I'm going to put the transfer paper, this is a pre-made piece, I'm going to put that down, face down, graphite side down, and I've got my tracing on top. And you may, during your transfer, you may have to shift this because this is on an 11.5 piece of paper and this is a 9 by 12 block. So just be careful. If you get to the side, you may not be getting your transfer well enough. And this is the reason why I taped it on two places, on one side or the top, because I want to be able to lift it to see if the transfer is taking place successfully. If it's not, then I have a couple problems. Either I did not cover my transfer paper well enough, or I'm not pressing down hard enough on the paper. See, that's why I like to use the heavy weight. I'm going to use a harder pencil on this, which this one is a 4H. It's got a harder lead in it or graphite in it, and so I can really push down hard on it to make sure the transfer is taking place. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make a piece of this transfer paper. So I'm going to set that aside, and it is kind of messy, so I'm going to take an old piece of foam board, I'm going to lay it down on this and go from there. I don't have to worry about messing this up. And I'm going to need a few sheets of just regular white printer paper. I'm just going to position these two extra sheets and lay one on top of it, and you'll see in a minute. I'm going to need a piece of graphite. It's called a graphite stick, and it's a 4B. You can get them in 6B. Those are very soft as you go up in number, but a 4B is plenty soft. And I'm going to take the stick and I'm going to cover this sheet of paper. You can do it any way you feel most comfortable with. And if you want to, you can wear plastic gloves if you're worried about. I'm not going to do that now because I am going to stop when I get this finished, and I will wash my hands off before we go any further. You can go in a circular motion, or you can go in one direction and then come back in the opposite direction. But you've got to really just try to cover it the best you can. You may have to turn the stick. I've used this stick before, so it may be it's not connecting as well as it could be with the paper, but just turn it around and you'll get it. Go all the way to the sides. That way you don't have to move it around so much when you're doing your transfer, because all the way up to the edge will be working. You can see I've got a lot of pieces of graphite here, loose pieces of graphite. That's okay. I'm going to show you how we can sort of get rid of those. The reason I put these two pieces of paper under here, you can see how messy it is. And I don't really care that much about this board, but might as well try to be as neat as you can. Alright, that's pretty good. You can see. It's a little messy. I'm going to take a piece of paper towel. You can see these extra pieces here, and I'm going to start smoothing it out, and that'll get some of these loose pieces up. Go in a circular motion. It's almost like you're polishing it. try not to move this around too much because then I'm going to get a bunch of pieces on the other side, but that's all right. The first time you use a new piece of graphite paper, you may get some smudging on your sketch. Now this can be reused many times. If you find that your transfers are getting too light for you to see, then you might have to refresh the same piece of paper, or you can make a new one. Every once in a while you need to make a new one, but I use these over and over again. You can see it's pretty much getting rid of all those extra pieces and smoothing out where I do not have good coverage. And you might test this, and if it's way too light and you can't see it, then you need to go over it again and just polish it up again. It's just what you have to do. But because it can be used multiple times, it's worth it. It's worth the effort. Sometimes I make several of these at the same time and just store them. And how I store them, I usually take a couple pieces of white paper and I'll put them in between the two pieces of paper and put a couple of paper clips on them to hold them in place. And that's the way I store it. That way it doesn't get all over everything. So this one is ready. I'm going to stop for just a moment, get my hands rinsed off, and then show you how to complete this task of getting the final sketch onto your paper. Okay, I have my graphite transfer paper made, and I'm ready to make the transfer. So I'm going to lift that up, and I'm going to put my graphite side down, and I'm ready to start the transfer. Remember, I'm going to use a harder pencil. A 4H is what I usually use. I'm going to press down pretty firmly. I'm going to, I don't know, I'm pretty organized. Sometimes I'm too organized, but I like to start usually to the left and work toward the right. I'm going to do just a couple petals, and then I'm going to check and make sure that it's transferring. Now these slash lines on the sketch, that is where your shadows are going to go later, so those are indicating where your darker colors are going to go for your shadows. Let's see if it's transferring okay. It's lifted up. I'm a real stickler about being very accurate with my transfers, so it's working pretty well. That looks pretty good. And I can see it just fine, so I'm going to keep on going. Now at this point, if it wasn't transferring very well, you're either going to have to put some more graphite on this paper or press harder. I've already got one done. It's a little light. I can see it fine. But there's your finished transfer, and at this point, you are ready to paint. I hope to see you in Lesson 2, where we will begin working on the Xenia painting. This companion book will be available on Amazon. It will include all the essential materials that you will need to accomplish the paintings that are in this book. Also, all the paint palettes that I use for each painting, some cultural information about each of the plants, all the traceable sketches, and in color, the reference photos that I used, and photos of each of the finished paintings. My hope is that this will help you in your quest in becoming a watercolor painter. Good luck.